It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
With us now is Dr. Jack Sternberg, and Dr. Jack is not only my doctor, but I invited him on today because he also is very active in the Republican Party and the Tea Party. Dr. Jack is the former chairman of the Tea Party of Garland County, right? Yes. And I've always seen you at Republican Party activities. In fact, I saw you there a couple of weeks ago at the committee meeting here in Garland County.
Absolutely.
But, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things real quickly about the medical marijuana thing, because, that is an issue that you didn't see many Republicans really embrace because, well, you know why. And so we have medical marijuana was passed. The citizens voted on it. It was passed. And so we have that now in Arkansas, except we don't have it because it's been, how many months now? A year? It seems like forever since it was passed. And yet there are arguments and court cases, and it's just dragging out. There was this long process of deciding who's going to get to be on the committee that gets to decide who gets the licenses to distribute and grow it. And it's just a major battle. And of course, anytime the government gets involved in something like this, it opens the door to corruption. And there are already accusations along those lines that have been, and I expect much more of that, which is not unusual. Every state that has passed and has legalized medical marijuana has run into legal issues. I'm not so sure that the way that we're doing it is the best way, but hey, we're doing it. But I wanted to ask you, Doc, from a medical perspective, from a doctor's perspective, I mean, what is medical marijuana? Is it really helpful to people who have certain types of illnesses?
You know, the problem when you ask from a medical perspective is that there's so little objective scientific data out there that doctors are used to analyzing that it's very difficult to actually say, well, medically, I believe in it or I don't believe in it. And all of us have different opinions and different thoughts about it.
But were you torn on this issue?
Well, when we spoke on the phone, I said to you that I wanted to say right from the beginning that in the 60s and the 70s, I smoked marijuana. I did inhale, not like Bill Clinton. Okay. I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed being high. And when I was high, I didn't want to drive a car. When I was high, I didn't want to try to study. When I was high, I didn't want to do things in medical school and make decisions because I was incapable.
But in some states where this is passed, they're already seeing an increase in the number of accidents related to people driving under the influence.
So I told you another story that back in the 70s when I was giving cancer chemotherapy to my patients, they were using it to keep from being nauseous because we didn't have very good drugs back then.
And I know of cases where people are telling me, I know a guy here in Hot Springs who had chemotherapy, and he was really having trouble. He could not keep any food down. Right. And then he started smoking marijuana, that he was able to.
Well, I asked my patients repeatedly, did it keep them from throwing up during the time of getting the chemotherapy? Mm-hmm. And the answer that everyone gave to me was, no, it doesn't keep me from throwing up. I just don't care as much because I'm stoned. Okay. And I learned something from that a lot of the fear of and the negativity of the throwing up was emotional besides the physical. So over the years, since I haven't touched marijuana personally in 40 years, but I have no fear of it because I've used it. Okay, so my problem with marijuana is that it's not a great pain drug. We have better pain drugs.
But the pain drugs we have, are they not highly addictive? We are Arkansas, just so you know, folks, Arkansas is #2 in the nation for opioid addiction. And that's not only a costly venture, but there are also a number of side effects to being addicted to opiates.
And everything has a price.
There are other side effects to marijuana.
For marijuana to work, you have to be stoned. Whether it's for migraine headaches, whether it's for pain, whether it's for fibromyalgia, whether it's for any of these things, you just don't smoke a joint and then function normally. You're functioning stoned.
Okay, but so what is the difference between that though and cannabis oil?
Okay.
I mean, because
cannabis oil is another drug that is not very well studied. Cannabis oil comes from the hemp plant. It does not have psychotropic activity, and that's the beauty of it. The claims that you read on the internet is that it works for seizures, it works for migraines, it works for fibromyalgia, it works for knee pain, it works for everything. I mean, the claims are enormous. When you study And I did study it because my wife has a minor seizure disorder, and I wanted to give it to her. So I studied it as best I could, and discovered that there was almost nothing scientific out there about it, except in children with Dravet syndrome who have intractable epileptic seizures.
So it does work for children.
It does work for
Cannabis
children,
oil.
but the dose for children is 10 times higher than the dose that they're recommending for fibromyalgia and migraines and things like
But
that.
there's no consistency with the cannabis oil, is what I'm told. It's like you don't know which one is because there's no set ingredients, and so how do you?
And so now here's the next problem: the FDA has not approved it, so therefore all the internet places that you can buy it from, they all claim to have the purest CBD oil, and you have no way of knowing what you're getting, which is a fear. And that's not to say that some of it isn't good. You just don't have any way of comparing one to another.
So tell me if I'm right about this.
Okay.
My view is the reason we haven't studied it, you keep talking about there's no study, there's no documentation. The reason we don't have all that is because Big Pharma doesn't want us to study it because they're making billions of dollars and they control the legislators who aren't going to do anything about it as well. So is the pharmaceutical industry the reason that citizens are not getting the studies that they need to determine if this really is effective?
Well, I can't answer from personal experience on that. You may be absolutely right, but I'll give you examples. The CBD oil that was given to the children with Dravet syndrome called Charlotte's Web, that was purified in England and now has become an actual drug. It's called Epidiolex, and it will be available soon in this country. So now the British company that is producing it pure, so that you know what you're actually giving. The unfortunate thing is that they've already said, well, when we have it approved in the United States, a year's supply for these children will be $32,000.
Wow. So what is the answer?
And you can buy CBD oil now $80 a month.
Right. What is the answer? What would solve all the issues that we're having with this particular, with marijuana in general?
I think that the only time you can get really pure studies is when the government actually funds it themselves, so that there isn't, the drug company can't say afterwards, well, we spent $2 billion to get this drug to market, we have to make our money back. If the government was producing the study and thereby hopefully controlling a little bit of what the price was going to be when the drug came out,
right,
then it might work better. But we live in a capitalistic society, and it's always been this way.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's always been this way, and we have a government that is controlled by lobbyists for Big Pharma who don't want these studies done because they might actually find out that it does work in some areas and that it does not have the side effects of so many opiates. But okay, thank you for talking to us briefly about the medical marijuana issue.
And there is no real experts on this.
Right. Well, I wanted to hear from you because I thought this was so exciting. You volunteer for the VA now that you're retired,
right.
Okay? And you discovered an issue that you came up with a solution for, and I understand you wrote a letter to Vice President Mike Pence and got a response. Tell us about that.
I started asking if I could volunteer at the VA clinic here in Hot Springs a couple of years ago.
Okay.
It took quite a while to get their approval, then it took 4.5 months to get credentialed. Even though I was already practicing in the state of Arkansas, I was credentialed.
I'm so shocked that it took you so long to get something from the government.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that was unbelievable. Anyway, I finally did get approved, and I have to say that I went into it having heard so many stories about the VA and the lack of resources and the lack of money and how the veterans were treated. And I mean, I kind of went in with negative feelings. So I then I now volunteer at the local veterans clinic here in Hot Springs. I'm the walk-in urgent care doctor. I had to take 20 hours of courses just on how to use their electronic medical record. Their electronic medical record is so robust, it's so extensive, it's so excellent that it's a whole learning curve in itself.
Okay.
So I did that. I went to work there. I followed another doctor for 3 weeks because she had to show me how the VA system works.
How to use the system, right.
So I started working in there, and the first thing was I fell in love with our veterans. These are the finest people I've ever worked with.
They're the best of the best America has.
They're great patients. They came up in a system of being under authority. They do what you tell them. They take their pills on time. They call up to get them refilled. When you ask them to bring in a chart of their blood pressure or their blood sugars, they bring it in. They don't tell you, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I left it at home. These are great patients and great people.
You mean, unlike me, who calls you and tells you, this is what's wrong with me, so I just need this.
Well, you're usually right. So I'm your concierge doctor.
Okay. So,
but anyway, so I started looking at it, and I said to them, what can I do for you? They said, well, we have 2 doctors, we have 2 nurse practitioners. They can only see each one 12 patients a day, a total of 48 patients, and they're totally booked up, and they're 3 months behind or 4 months behind because all they can see is 12 patients a day. And I said, what can I do for you? And they said, can you be the urgent care doctor? If someone shows up on a Monday sick, would you see them? If somebody calls in on Friday and needs to be seen the following week, we have no place to put them. Can you see them? And I said, absolutely. So when I started working, I realized that the biggest impediment to taking care of patients was the time spent on the electronic medical record. In other words,
normally in a real environment, doctors don't have to do that. They have scribes that do that, right?
Well, some do.
Okay.
The majority of doctors, even in the private world, who now have to, by law, use the electronic medical record,
okay,
they don't usually have scribes. Okay. A few doctors I knew would have a nurse follow them and act as their scribe. So as I, here I was now, I'm not getting paid, but let's say I'm a $200 an hour doctor. I'm sitting there typing out my own progress note. I'm the one clicking the mouse clicks on how to get a drug ordered or how to get a lab ordered. Or if I want to have an MRI, I have to ask the patient 10 questions like, do you have a head shrapnel? Do you have a pacemaker? I had to do all this. I had to do all the clicks. And then at the end of every visit, I had to find the ICD-10 code to put it down. In other words, I was doing all of this work.
Bureaucratic red tape for a government-run facility. I'm so shocked.
But please, you see, this is where at times I want to say, I'm not against that. I think the electronic medical record and what it does is wonderful. It's time consuming. So I realized if I could only see 2 people an hour because I was spending 15 minutes with the patient and 15 minutes with the record doing the typing and putting all this in, if I had an $18 an hour clerk who knew how to do all this, I could sort of tell her or him what I wanted written. I would say, this is the lab I want. This is the x-rays I want. This is what the plan I had. And as I'm seeing the patient, they could be doing the typing. I could double the number of patients I could see per hour and then still give them equal care because the doctoring part is what they wanted. I can do that in 15 minutes, but I was wasting 15 minutes on the record.
Right.
So I wrote to the Vice President Pence. I wrote to Bruce Westerman, our District 4 Congressman. And this is the amazing thing. I wrote Bruce Westerman at 11 o'clock in the morning. He wrote me back at 1 o'clock and told me he loved my idea of hiring a clerk to do this.
So I'm going to have to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to hear more about what Bruce Westerman did to help with this, as well as the response that you got from Vice President Mike Pence. We're at a break, though, so we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, you're going to hear about what the Vice President said and did and what Bruce Westerman did and how that's going to help veterans in the future at our VA hospitals. Hopefully, not only in Arkansas, but around America. Stay with us. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Paul Harrell program. I'm Jen Morgan, filling in for Paul, who's on vacation. Paul will be back next week. And just wanted to tell you, in case you're just now joining us, Conduit News is the #1 source in the state of Arkansas for conservative Arkansas politics and news. We love Conduit. And if you want to know more about Conduit Fraction, we are building a liberty machine in this state. And I say we, even though I'm not an employee of Conduit, I say we because I fully support Conduit and what they're doing. And why? Because I was a journalist for 27 years, and I know about their determination to be factual, fact-based with the content that they put out there. If you want to be sure that the news you're getting is solid, and you want to share it knowing that no one's going to be able to come back at you and say, well, there's wrong information in that story, then you can share Conduit News articles. The Conduit News has a Facebook page. You can find them on Twitter. Their website, www.conduitnews.com. And just going to tell you my favorite news outlet. And I'm honored to be asked to fill in for Paul this week. Dr. Jack Sternberg has been joining us. And Dr. Jack, but if you didn't catch us before the break, Dr. Jack has been talking about, he is a volunteer doctor at the VA clinic here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, in Garland County, Arkansas, and he noticed that there was a kind of an issue with the process that was affecting their ability to see more veterans. They can only see 12 patients a day, I think is what the doc said. Yeah, before he came up with an idea. So, doctor, before the break, you said.
Well, let me say one more thing before you go there. I was astounded to discover some things that were wrong in our perception of the VA system.
Okay.
They have plenty of resources. They have plenty of money. They have plenty of people that work there. The people that work there are dedicated to the veterans. I mean, it's not, a lot of the stories you hear are just fabrications. I mean, I can get a veteran everything they need if I can just.
You can. You know as well as I do, doctor, though, that in every business, in every agency, there are going to be bad apples. Sure. And I know there are some stories out there that are true about things that have happened to veterans, and veterans die waiting to get treatment and waiting to get seen by a doctor. And the process that you have come up with is actually going to get veterans to a doctor faster. Tell us when
a patient waits too long and dies, it's because of a lack of manpower or people power. In other words, they need the capability of seeing more patients.
Right.
So you either can increase the number of doctors and nurse practitioners, or each doctor and nurse practitioner should be able to see more patients effectively. You can't find more doctors or nurse practitioners because there's a shortage in the VA, there's a shortage in private practice, and the two are competing for each other. So it just doesn't exist. The people don't exist to hire. So what can you do? I came up with the idea, and it's not my own personal idea. I know that private doctors, many of them, are using scribes or clerks to use the machine to type in the progress note, to do the ordering, to do all of these things. When I was in private practice and I ordered an MRI, I checked the box MRI, and then my people ordered it. I didn't have to do the ordering.
When you're doing it for the government, you got to fill out a bunch of boxes of it, right?
I personally have to fill out all of that. Right. I mean, I'm the clerk now. So I wrote to Vice President Pence because a friend of mine knew him well. I used to go to his church. He flew on Air Force Two down at Billy Graham's funeral. And he said to me, when I told him this idea, he said, write me a concise letter. I'll get it to the Vice President.
Okay.
And then I also said, well, I ought to send this letter both to the Vice President and my local Congressman, Bruce Westman.
Yes, Congressman. Yes.
So I sent it to him at 11 o'clock as an email. At 1 o'clock, I heard back from Bruce. He said, I think this is a great idea to hire clerks to do that part. At 3 o'clock, he told me that he had already spoken to the congressman in charge of the VA subcommittee, showed him my letter, and the fellow ends up, he's a doctor, and said back to him, this doctor in Hot Springs has it exactly right. 2 weeks ago, we got funding to start a pilot project to do just that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how long, so you got the funding, and so it's now underway.
Some places.
All right. Is it working?
I have no idea.
You don't know. You haven't actually got to use your own idea yet, right?
Well, no. I mean, a pilot project means they're doing it in 2 or 3 places and then ironing out the bugs.
Right.
But I figured I had gotten as far as I was going to get, and I'm just happy to be able to say that I know what's happening.
Right. Well, that is exciting, and anytime we can help our veterans, it's a good thing. And so I appreciate you taking time to not only volunteer for the VA, but also to look at the system and the process and say, we're spending as much time doing the paperwork as we are with the patients. And if we do it this way, we can see more patients. And
I have to say that they're working there. I'm the one that's been blessed.
Maybe that's going to be a national thing. I hope so. Thank you, Dr. Jack, for joining us. I appreciate your perspective always. And thanks for all that you're doing for the conservative movement in the state of Arkansas.
All right.
All right.
Very good.